We're back. It seems like an eternity since the glory days. Paris last year, 3 1-point wins, Boks world champions. Finally, Test rugby back. Oh, I missed it. I missed Test rugby. We're up against Wales. 70,000 people at Twickenham was the double header. We have the iconic Scott Gibbs with us. Played the Springboks 6 times, won 2 out of 3 for the British and Irish Lions. On the receiving end, 3 for Wales, but it's that 97 performance. Famous for running over Osterrein. No one's ever done that again. No one will ever try to do that again. But we spoke pre the Test match, Scotty. We spoke about what Wales would want to get out of before they head off to Australia. Primarily for our audience, what do you think the Springboks took out of it? It's the first time you've seen that Springbok side play. A lot of changes because of injuries. Tony Brown as the backs coach. Do you see any variations there?
Well, I guess there was a few things to unpick, really, wasn't it? You know, from a South African perspective, could you see, was there an instant identification with Tony Brown's philosophy of how we're going to, transform or create a new paradigm in South African attack, given the individual and inimitable brilliance with a lot of these new athletes coming in and out of the fold? So to answer that question, I didn't see too much, but the fact is I thought there was so much disconnect between Faf and Jordan Hendrickson from the outset. Maybe because they just didn't get enough reps during the kind of period that they had together in the minicamp. And also I was slightly kind of disappointed with, Andre Esterhuizen's impact early in the game, especially when you see there's a little bit of dysfunction between 9 and 10 and the access and the cohesion between forwards and backs, that I thought he should have taken a couple of early settlers and provided a target or so. But that said, I for me it was business as usual. I predicted a blowout. It was a little sloppy at times. There was some indiscipline, but notably there were plenty of performances of note that caused encouragement. I thought Evan Roos, was unlucky not to go over the white line for 2 tries. Edwills, Van der Merwe's debut was pretty immaculate. The list can go on.
Zels, you've been a big Andre the Giant fan. He looks but he looks like a monster.
But I really like him. And so let me give you some context. Is that he's 6'4", 18 and a half stone, up against Mason Grady, obviously a tower of a physical unit that is an athletic specimen that's probably had more exposure on the wing than it is at first centre. For those two number 12s, you would have thought that their ability to settle early and create a nice tight game plan is the way to create momentum and get some early yardage, some early hits, and get some shapes together. I thought Mason Grady was, had enough productivity during the game, but it didn't see much impact because I think Gatland's coaching message was, let's just pare this back, let's just simplify it. So disappointing in best part for those two players, given that's essentially what I look for, is the impact of a 12. And I'll go back to Delende. There's just a calming feeling when he's on the field and there's a presence. And again, I just love the way that he can just shift the ball with his feet and his shoulders and so on.
Does Andre the Giant ever come through? Because it's now 4 or 5 years. I mean, when Damon came on, you just see a big difference in terms of the quality and the experience. Give us a view there, Ricky.
No, there's no Ricky. Ricky's been deported. So I am definitely not an Andre the Giant apologist, but what I will say is, Scotty alluded to some of the changes that we may see with the Springboks under Tony Brown in terms of the attack. And I wonder whether what we used to seeing as a 12 as a target setter, crashing it up, being physical at the gain line. The one thing I do remember Andre Esterhuizen doing was passing the ball, nice quick hands to send us away for the first try. So it may be that the role of the 12 may have been tweaked for this particular game under Tony Brown's system. Maybe he was told that he wasn't going to play such a pivotal role in it. Maybe he was just doing what he's been told. I don't know whether we can really judge Andre too harshly on this performance.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, it's possible. But I will say when Dukes came on, it was a whole different ball game again. As usual, the boy gets the ball in no space, throws somebody around like they're 50 kilograms lighter, buys time for the rest of the pack to get him. He's just an immovable.
But anyway, what I will say is that when you have a weapon like that, when you have a resource like that, 6'4", 18 stone, you can't wait until the 54th minute to have a positive touch. It's got to be early settling, getting into shape, and the production is front loaded rather than back ended. Yeah. Where I do see one or two glimmers of maybe Tony's influences that they try to shift the onus on the second centre in trying to isolate the outside centre to create that 15 5-metre opportunities where you can convert a 3-on-2 to a 2-on-1. And they did that in best part relatively easy for the first try, and certainly in the second half there were 3 or 4 instances on the left-hand side that I thought that's where the shift and the onus. And maybe that's from Andre's perspective was, you gotta be that kind of fan sometimes where you're trying to pull in defenders by just being a target, and it just goes either a face ball or goes beyond into the second pocket.
If you look at the Island series, that's the big one now. In a fortnight's time, Loftus, Durban, they'll play Portugal after that. A lot of these players will get a run against Portugal. It was a hit out for those Japanese-based players who haven't played for a while. Some guys coming back from injury, notably Malcolm Marx. The biggest thing, he got through 40-plus minutes. But if you look at individuals who've played, URC, Afasi being the primary one for me, did he enhance his selection by performance? Or what areas does he still have to work on in terms of a 15?
So I thought he was good under the high ball. And he did his job there quite well. He got high rankings. I see everyone rated him very highly. I was maybe not as euphoric about Fassi's performance. There were elements in that game where there was a stage in that game where the Boks looked like they thought they were going to win 80-0, and then they started throwing balls around. There was a loose ball at the back that Fassi tried to sling through his legs. And immediately I thought, this is the kind of thing that Rassie probably would not like to see. So Fassi had a good game. I'm not saying he didn't enhance his reputation there, but it still remains to be seen whether some of those guys in games where there's more parity around the collision, how they're going to perform under that pressure. I thought Jordan probably didn't do himself any favours in that game. He had some moments, but then also looked a little bit under pressure and lost at times. And then Sasha, as predicted, I thought had a great game when he came on.
But if you look, and I think more and more it becomes clear when you get a guy like Willie Leroux, his experience, Damien Willemse as he came through in the World Cup. When you've got a proper 15 who's been around, who's got experience, he plays the back three, doesn't he? He plays for the right winger, he plays for the left winger, he comes in as a second receiver for the 10. So his game, a guy like Willie Leroux, you see, and especially in that semi-final of the URC against Leinster, you see this amazing collective from a 15, pulling his winners back, like positionally playing the game, where when I watched Fassi, it looked like an individual playing well, but he wasn't playing that collective back three. He wasn't a driver in the game.
Yeah. That the back three in the backfield is usually it should be like a wave or like an umbrella where they have the vision, they are the eyes at the rear that give the communication to the 10 and whoever is that first or second receiver to play the territory, to identify where there's a 5, where there's a 4, where we need to shift. And I think that's just inexperience or with Fassi, that he just hasn't had those big game experiences under his belt, so that he can just feel the game a little bit better rather than being instinctive. Because instinct is one thing, and it's not a negative to like not coach it. But the fact is, sometimes you do have to play what's in front of you.
Is he more an international win option than a fullback option? I mean, he has such natural talent. Or is he going to be that player that potentially will be playing the lesser big games if the others are fit?
I think he just needs to be in the right environment. Like you look at JP Peterson when he first came on, he's the guy. Fassi reminds me of him in a way. Very raw when he first came on the scene, obvious athletic ability, game-breaking ability. But I think what Fussy will benefit from is playing with Willie LaRue and Chesa and Colby. I think the more settled that team is, the better. For a guy like Fussy's development and growth. At the Sharks, they've had a lot of issues around who's playing 10, who's playing fullback. There's been disruption. I think the more time he gets in the seat there, I think the more comfortable he can be.
One thing hasn't changed in the last 25 years is you're only as good as the players around you, you know? And that is all about communication. It's about intuition. It's about feeling and reading the body language. And that's only... You can only do that when you're in the seat, and you know, when these guys are there communicating, and that umbrella wave that I talk is just one cohesive backfield attack and defensive eyes of the team type of thing.
Let's go back. I mean, you've played at the highest level, Scotty. You've played in World Cups, Lions Series. We've covered the sport for the best part of 30 years. Sometimes you just see a player and you just know, hang on a second, this kid has got something else. From the moment I saw Sasha play at school for Bishops at under 18, play for the SA under 20s, lead them, make his URC debut as a 20-year-old in the year that they won the thing, he just commands a calm and a presence when he gets on the field and the way he reads the game. And then for him to be given a 52-meter kick straight up, bands it through the middle, basically looks at the coaching box and Rusty's hosing himself to say, there you go, my boy, that's what I expected you to do.
Totally.
And then just immediately getting involved in the next ruck, kicking it to the corner, kicking the conversion. So
you missed out Llandovery College, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Apparently, you played in Llandovery College.
No way.
So there's a little bit of Welsh influence there. Whether he takes that.
How did Gatton not get that? Could have been there.
But I tell you where I'm going to struggle now. Two things: the pronunciation. You know, try saying Sasha Feinberg Mungomazello, you know, chewing a food pretzel. That's going to be impossible. So we're going to have to curtail him. So for now, Sasha, you know, I when that penalty was awarded, I was like 55 metres in Twickenham. That's a bit of a stretch. The thing is, he could have taken that from 70. It really, you know, and that just shows you there's a swagger about him. You know, whether you can make comparisons with Mbappe, there is speed, grace, elegance, understanding. Roger Fred, there is something about this kid now where it has to be harnessed though, and this is the big thing, Mark, is that, you know, too many players have been, have been a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'd like to understand what the South African psyche is about. Where is this player going to play? Because if he is just going to be this utility player that either starts or comes off the bench and it's a 10, 12, 15 and he's going to get lost in the ether, I'm afraid that that's not going to be the best use of this wonderful resources you have in this player.
Look, really 10 for me is his position.
100%.
10 and he kicks and he controls the game.
Brilliant.
And he reminds me so much of a 22-year-old Dan Carter. He's not rushing things. You talk about that swagger, kicks them from everywhere. But some of the line kicks I've seen him do at URC level and under 21s, when he puts the ball on his foot, he knows where he wants it to go. He sees space. I remember last year he came in that URC game. I think it was Cardiff where the Stormers lost. He came on in the second half, wet conditions, and the first ball he got, he played the 4G surface. How the ball would sit up in it and just kicked it to where the winner was in open space. And you thought you actually seen a game that others aren't seen. So for me, he was one of the biggest positives that came out. Pollard is there. We know they have a lot of faith in Mani Lebok, but this guy's going to be in the mix with Damian Willemse injured as well, and he's going to be in the mix for a long time. I think the Stormers can write him off. They'll get 6 matches a year out of him now. I don't think he's going anywhere far from that Boks squad.
Well, it's amazing in such an informative part of his career as he's evolving as a player, and hopefully, as you said, you know, a nailed on number 10 where there's an option going forward. But the fact is that his understanding, as you say, of game management, time and belief and confidence on the ball, and then playing the different surfaces. You know, whether, as you say, with a 4G pitch. He came off the bench in Newport, changed the game on a dime.
Exactly.
Two tries in three touches.
And you kind of go, that is just one of life's impossibilities, to have such an impact. When you're away from home, you are chasing the game, and you're looking for players to say, well, what are you going to do? Usually that is someone who's going to make a carry, or someone who's going to just change it with a defensive orientation. But the fact he did it with the ball on the toe, with a worm ball, with a bird ball, you know, I mean, a special talent, a real special talent. How that gets harnessed now will be literally the testament to the intelligentsia of the backroom staff of the Boks, and it is something to behold.
Yeah, I think just the way that, I mean, in that match Scotty's talking about, he comes back from long-term injury. The team is all over the field, and he just straightens the line, creates a try, catches the ball behind him to score on the touchline.
Yeah.
What you said, Dan Carter, his temperament reminds me of Andre. When Andre came out as a youngster, under 20 level, he looked like a veteran of World Cups. He looked like the occasion was too small for him. It was too easy.
Well, when he came from his school desk to win the Under-20 World Cup and be the only South African player ever to play for the Under-20s as a schoolboy, and they went back and wrote an exam the next day, you knew that this kid had something special. When he scored 2 tries against the All Blacks at Ellis Park, and Heineke Meyer, God knows why, but he pulled him on 59 minutes to keep him humble. He also pulled that whole front row as you were on the try line. He's Sasha. Youngster, the future, but a guy that for me just is getting a lot better with age, doesn't get his full reps, Jesse Kriel.
Yes, I was hoping you were going to talk about him.
I mean, if I think where he was in 2015, Japan beats South Africa, he gets fended off. Sonny Bill Williams is picking him up off the turf in the semi-final, telling him that could easily be me that you're picking up. Sat behind Lukhanyo for a good season and a half. While Lukhanyo was playing great rugby, got an opportunity, the ultimate team man, always there and thereabouts. Brilliant at the World Cup. I watched that France quarterfinal the other day it was playing. He was just outstanding. Had an injury in Japan early season, came back, and I just thought industrious, confident, and hell of explosive.
Yeah, we spoke about the Japanese players looking a bit rusty, but Muscle Tech was one guy who came straight back into the lineup and was playing like we played the World Cup final 2 weeks ago. Like he's hot, on form, looked calm, controlled proceedings, massive impact.
For me, there's a long graveyard of players that have just had a career of being a rugby athlete. And I think Jesse Kriel was guilty in his early informative years of just being this phenomenal athlete, but lacked a little bit of rugby craft through experience and, again, playing in good systems and so on. And I think what we've seen over the last 18 months, 2 years, is an evolution. Whether that's been a conscious thing or it's just that he is feeling his way in the position, which is outside centre, which is a difficult position from a defensive perspective and also in his attacking prowess. So, but he has now started to put consistency ahead of potential. And that's always a great sign, isn't it?
Look, and he started at 15. He was played against Argentina on the win in Durban. He had a mare. They lost under Heineke Meyer. But 13 was always his best position. But as you said, from a natural athlete of 15 who played on instinct, he had to hone his craft there. But I think the World Cup and them playing him, when Lukhanyo became available and they drafted him and they still played Jesse Kriel based on the moment, the occasion, the performance, he's just flown from there. If you look at the match as a whole, Rassie was beaming throughout the match, laughing. It looked like he was having a jolly old good time there. 41-13, lovely scoreline, no injuries, guys got hit-outs. What would he feel getting on the plane coming back? He's got a week now to prepare for the opener against Ireland at Loftus. Where do you think the mindset would be?
Well, listen, I think you as a rugby director, you always got to look at what didn't go right, you know, and highlight some of the temperament issues. Like we said, you know, playing big moments. And whilst this was an exhibition game, essentially, the fact is that they were sloppy. There was some disconnect. So that's easily remedied just by reps and personnel, isn't it? So now that he understands everybody came through relatively health-free, they'll return, they'll go into their mini camp, then he's going to triage what his best 23 looks like for that first game in Pretoria, and then it looks like, where do we get the balance? So of course I think that with all of the pieces and all of the weapons they have, it is going to come down to selection. And what is the best fit from a back row balance perspective, from a 9, 10, 12, 13 axis perspective, what that back three looks like, you know, and it is all about who's available at this present time. Yeah. But I think there's enough encouragement and there's also enough in the background, the white noise, the bite about the losing streak against Australia, against Ireland, you know, last 3 games. So there's a lot at stake.
Well, Zels, you and your team have put together a magnificent preview issue. It's the series the world wants, Ireland against South Africa. Interesting enough, these two teams have only played each other twice in the last 6 years. That was 1916 in Dublin, and it was the 13-8 match at the World Cup. They should be playing each other a lot. Ireland hasn't been here since 2016. It was such a bad series, I actually forgot we won it.
Yeah.
We won it 2-1. Some bloke let me know that you keep on saying 1-1, mate. Where were you for the third one? Well, obviously I was asleep. Sorry, Tucci, it's the one thing you got right. You beat Ireland in a series. It's going to be a fantastic series. We're going to chat about that over the next 2 weeks. Switching our attentions to the big one at Loftus. Incredible occasion. 50,000, just under 51,000 people there. 13-0 up. It looks like they're going to score 20. Wilco Low, it's not awarded. Glasgow handing in there like someone who's just not going to go away. Scores 13-7. And then that last 40 minutes, just an incredible performance from, I'd say the Scots, but it's not all Scots. It's a South African coach, South African captain, who was very inspirational, Carl Steyn on the win. I've heard a lot of people say that the Bulls threw it away, the Bulls choked. I'm inclined to say that the Bulls got beaten by a very good side who stayed in the fight long enough to show their wares.
Agreed. I think, and I said it after the game, I feel like Glasgow probably would have beaten Scotland on the day. The way they played, especially that second half, absolutely fantastic. There's an element to that backline of theirs that reminds me of the Lions circa 2017. They've got tackle breakers in that backline. And what that does, it puts the defense on roller skates because you're constantly trying to mop up for guys that are getting through half gaps, breaking half tackles. It just creates a lot of uncertainty. And the Bulls are a team that kind of play from ruck to ruck. They like the structure. They like getting set up for defense coming up. But that backline, Steyn, Cancellieri, all those guys had the feet and the physicality to create doubt in the contact situation. I think that kept Glasgow's attack rolling and kept the Bulls spending a lot of energy on D. And I thought that the pack fronted up massive.
And Villy's absence was very noticeable.
I think that was noticeable just because of the directional play, and the fact is that at 13, as you said, possibly go into 20, was that enough for a buffer at halftime to provide the relevant confidence in the second half that we can make some adaptations? Sadly, that the message, if there was or not, they didn't pivot. They didn't adapt to the conditions. They stuck to their kind of one-dimensional carries. Conversely, Glasgow took a lot of information during that first half. Second half, the pivot, the speed, agility, and quickness of the players started to pick the outside shoulder and the inside shoulder. They moved the defence to their liking.
And they're incredibly well conditioned. Eh? We saw they came back in the league game. It's 21 unanswered points, and the Bulls won 40-34.
I think props to their strength and conditioning team for all the right reasons. They were away last week. The long travel. The 14th man, which is the altitude. They looked stronger. They looked more impactful. There was a lot of power and precision in what they did in the second half. And actually, that 50 to 60 minutes, they went through the gears. We don't normally see that. There's always a deterioration in overall conditioning when we get to that hour mark when it's played at altitude. But the fact is, wherever they found that, whether that's a mental thing, but I think the physiology, whatever the message was or whatever the conditioning has been, their periodization, peaking at the right moment, they accelerated that second half and deserved that win unreservedly.
13-7, the momentum is with Glasgow. Somehow the Bulls get a penalty. Hurston kicks it 16-7. They've fought so hard to just get two scores out. And Auriclo drops a kick-off with no one around him. Gives away the penalty. They kick to the corner, score 16-14. The game's gone from there. How much is that going to haunt a player like Auriclo?
And I mean, that kick-off receipt has been a recurring issue with the Bulls. The second half, teams overhauling him has been a recurring issue. There's something systematically that needs to change there. I'm not so sure it's all on the players. I think something in that Bull system needs to be tweaked to get them to their best ability. I think back about how the Bulls beat Leinster in the first go. Basically, Leinster didn't have an answer for Ulrich Lowe the first time they went up there. They just came around, same side, getting over the gain line, creating momentum. and were incredible in that game. Then when Leinster came to Loftus Versfeld for the semi-final, they didn't have an answer for Willie Leroux's cross kicks and kicks in behind when they moved across to cover the cross kicks. But on Saturday, there was no Willie Leroux, and the Glasgow had an answer for Ulrich, and that was it.
Just too many dimensional players, like we said. In our preview, caveat: buyer beware. We are talking about a side that consistently has beaten defenders, and has had most post-contact meters. Again, double in the second half to the Bulls. So that just shows you how you can't rely on your strong fundamentals to carry you through a cup final. And maybe, there's probably data points from last week, and if you overlay them with this week's performance from a conditioning perspective, you'll see why. But the fact is, Glasgow consistently have been doing this in and out this season, and that's the reason why they top the charts with what is the most intangible kind of data point is what rugby's all about: beating defenders, post-contact meters, carrying more. So
and great to see someone like Franco, because we talk about Rassie and Jacques going to Munster and kind of completing the apprenticeship there. His time in Italy, now going to Scotland. I mean, he is becoming one of the more sought-after young coaches in world rugby.
Well, I talked last week on our show about this production facility that is, South Africa and developing talent. The great thing is that with Franco Smith, Johan van Graan, what we're seeing now is a younger profile of a coach that probably understands professional sport in its entirety a lot better than some of those that are longer tooth in their tenure. So it is exciting that there's potentially a handful of great coaches applying their trade overseas, but bringing a new paradigm, or the ability to bring a new paradigm into South African rugby to make sure that it goes forward in the right hands.
And then you think the quality of South African players / coaches that aren't necessarily involved in this country. Now we've seen Duan van der Merwe become a superstar for Scotland, play for the British and Irish Lions, very good for Edinburgh. Carl Steyn, he was playing for Stellenbosch University, he's playing for Griquas. Captain of Glasgow, very good for Scotland. He comes from the right stock in terms of leadership. His old man, Rory Steyn, was the personal bodyguard to the late Nelson Mandela. Yeah. I was so impressed with his leadership on a Saturday evening, the questions he asked, when he asked them, when he just double-checked with the referee to think maybe this is going a bit towards the home crowd. Just articulate and outstanding, and I think Scotland have certainly got a good one there, thanks to a grandmother. But to get 51,000 people at Loftus, URC, wow, 3 different winners, 3 different countries, 2 in succession, the team being on the road, playing a semi-final away and a final away. Glorious and winning. Comp. So, hey, forget about the travel and everyone says it can't be done. It can be done. A lesson for South African teams, if we should go for a final, it can be done. It's been done the last 2 seasons in Cape Town, in Loftus. 56,300 here when Munster did it to the Stormers.
Correct.
51,000 when Glasgow did it to the Bulls. Fantastic end to our domestic season. I watched for the first time this season, I watched a complete game, and it was the Super Rugby Pacific final. 51,000 at Eden Park. It reminded me of being there in 2011. There was a fervour of buzz that I just haven't seen for a long time in New Zealand rugby, and a fantastic performance from the Blues, who I felt looked like the Boks. Vern Cotter, 10 years at Clermont, 2 years at Montpellier. He did a stint with Scotland, won 19 out of 35 games, and he did a season with Fiji. He has turned Auckland Blues into something people said you couldn't. A team with a pack with some wonderful backs.
Sure. I mean, yeah, there was. The Blues blew the Chiefs away. I caught the game. I recorded it and watched it on Sunday. The Blues were ferocious. I do think that the Chiefs didn't pitch in that game at all. I mean, when I see Patrick Tuipulotu running through the whole of the Chiefs pack, I couldn't believe it was the same guy. But one thing that...
Where did they send him for that week?
Exactly, mate. One thing New Zealand rugby does have is some kick-ass outside backs who can finish. Some real brutes with speed and tenacity. I see Talia, Reese, Caleb Clark are all in that all-black squad. They've got the backs. They could do the Glasgow. They've got all the units to make that happen, and now they just need to answer questions about some of their forwards.
We're going to get to that all-black squad now, but for the romantic in me as well, I happened to be at Eden Park in 1996 when the Blues, John Alomwe inspired Blues, beat a Sharks team that had 14 Springboks and they run on 15. A fantastic team.
Yeah.
And they beat them 45-21 in the final. And this Thunderbolt thighs, Irani Clark, at centre, scored a wonderful try. And 28 years later, his boy, who looks like an identical twin, scored 3 in the final.
Yeah.
And it's really the first time you've seen an Auckland side play with that kind of authority. So I think in the Clark family, some really cool emotions on Saturday night. Scotty, five additions to the All Black squad in terms of uncapped players. A lot of players not available because of injury. Some big retirements. Retalix in Japan. Whitelocks finally said goodbye with a win for the Barbars against Fiji. Same group of players, different coaches.
That's right. The squad announced, nothing jumps off the page, really. I suppose the anticipation is Scott Robertson's thumbprint. And what does that look like? Because it is a lot more difficult coaching an international team when your time with the players is curtailed into like a 2-week mini camp, preparing for a tour, rather than having them day in, day out, where you understand their body language, you understand what makes them tick, their kind of, their own biorhythms and circadian rhythms, and how you can, you really knit that. So his first opportunity is obviously to gel. There's enough in that squad for, obviously, for them to go on a good streak. But I guess the unknown is, and not the unknown, but it's just like, what are we going to see? Are we going to see a different All Black way methodology of play? Is it going to feel like a quasi Crusaders type plan? Is it going to be more of a hybrid? Do they return back to base fundamentals and use that inimitable power and skill that they have in various positions, i.e., RD number 8, strong back 3 from a carrying perspective? I think there's very little very little creativity, and has been their bête noire in New Zealand rugby for a long time in the midfield. Really is, You can go back. There's been a litany of players from the Joe Stanleys all the way through Manos. I think that is something that he has to contend with. It is what it is. So there's an onus on, obviously, directional play with the half-back pairing and the eyes at the back to see what type of new shift this All Black side is going to look like.
Yeah, and immediately go to Crusader Scott Barrett, his captain. A familiarity in some of the players he's picked. George Bell, the Crusaders hooker that he's brought in, even though he's quite down on the pecking order. But the Blues hooker, former Kane, Ricky Teali.
Yeah, my Mexican cousin. Ricky Telly,
yeah. I thought he played quite well as well. I think he was a surprise omission.
Yeah.
But they look a bit light on hooker, a bit light on lock in terms of depth. But lots of good young loose forwards there.
Totally.
This Cortez, the scrum off's not bad.
Yeah.
And Roygaard is injured.
Yeah.
And then the outside backs. And nice to see Severy's back.
Yes.
And you've got, Mark Tillier is just a great player. And then you've got Caleb Ralph and the others just fighting out for one position. So they're a bit like us. They're very blessed there.
Yeah.
They just don't wear the scrum caps.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I can't answer some of the questions that Scott raised now. I didn't understand any of the French. But what I will say is that the All Blacks will be better than they were under Fosbury.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But there is this anticipation that they have to be, because they've been waiting for 7 years to give this guy the job.
Yeah.
Somehow Fozzie nearly poxed it, but for a kick. A missed kick from Mahunga, and Jordy Barrett, he may be holding a World Cup now and be called a sir. But thank God he didn't, because he certainly didn't deserve it. Neither did that squad in terms of where they had come over the 4 years.
Yeah.
But there's this hype and this expectation, and Robertson keeps on saying, we have picked a player who we believe can play a certain type of rugby.
There you go.
Which means it's not the one they were playing at the World Cup or previous to that. So interesting, though, that most of the pool is that went to the World Cup. So it's also showing where they do believe, regardless of the coach, they do believe those are the best players. Maybe just weren't coached well.
Yeah, no, I think, I agree with that. I look at the makeup of that squad and I just wonder about some of the changes that Razor might make, how many Barretts we might get in that starting lineup, and whether one of them is 6'5" and sitting at fullback again, and what that means for the way that they can play. But they've definitely got the cattle to kind of make up for a lack of grunts up front, with some of those backs that they've got there, because they really are a unique threat out
Well,
wide.
the one thing that we expect from Scott Robertson, that they will be, pardon the pun, razor sharp in communication, in understanding, you know, both thematically and conceptually in the context of the overall game plan. They're not going to be looking around, looking at each other as like, what are we doing now? Their ability to think quick on their feet, their adaptability to change certain situations, but again, underpinned by just constant communication of knowing what role you have to do from 1 to 23. That is the base that Robertson will instill in his players, is this instinctive belief that what I'm telling you is knowledge, and knowledge is king.
All right, so it all starts not this weekend, next weekend. It's England against the All Blacks. It's Wales against Australia. It's France in Argentina, and it's Ireland in South Africa. It's World Cup kind of matchups. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to talk lots of rugby throughout of July. Later this week, we're going to talk about that opening test, Boks against Ireland, and focus primarily. We know what the Ireland team's going to look like. It's Leinster. So we're going to look at who we would pick, knowing who's available. They should announce those squads a bit later this week. But Scotty, as always, wonderful to have you here. Zels, nice to have you back. And Ricky, we've checked on his immigration status. He will be back at some time this year.
En die gaat lower into langs. Maar Mapipi wat wat